Welcome to the Warrior Bride. I'm Autumn Woods, and today we're continuing to find lessons in godly masculinity as seen through the life of Joseph. In this next section, we see how far Joseph has come from the swaggering 17-year-old we met a few chapters ago, and how much the Lord has transformed him internally. No matter how his circumstances changed, from the pit to Potiphar's house and from the prison to the palace, Joseph held fast to God and conducted himself with integrity, and God blessed him for it. When we last left off, after Joseph was falsely accused, Potiphar threw him into the king's prison, where the favor of the Lord caused the keeper of the prison to promote Joseph to be second in command. All the prisoners and their doings were put under Joseph's jurisdiction. And like Potiphar before him, the keeper trusted him and did not look into anything under Joseph's guard. Joseph had learned from his mistakes with his brothers. Yes, he was innocent and wrongfully accused and imprisoned, and from a moral standpoint, he had a right to defend himself. But he also recognized that, as a slave, even as an influential slave, his words meant nothing against the words of the boss's wife. So, as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Joseph recognized that he was subject to the laws of the Egyptians. There was nothing he could do about that. But he could control his own conduct and guard his heart as a citizen of God's kingdom. Because he clung steadfastly to the Lord and maintained his integrity even under false accusation, the Lord continued to be with Joseph and bless him with favor and authority, even in prison. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, in the place where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. So they were in custody for a while. Did you catch that? Remember that Potiphar is the captain of the guard. So the king's prison is somehow adjacent to Potiphar's house, and Potiphar is still giving Joseph limited authority in it as a servant leader, in addition to his responsibilities as keeper of the prison. In the New Testament, we're told, "Conduct yourselves with such honor among the Gentiles, that though they slander you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict." Even though Potiphar threw Joseph in prison, because of the Lord's influence and Joseph's previous track record, the captain of the guard still trusted his former slave enough to put him in charge of the well-being of these high-ranking people. Even Joseph's perceived enemy was subject to the mandate of divine favor on Joseph's life because of the grace of God. When Joseph first began to dream, he was so excited about the prophetic knowledge that he didn't use wisdom in stewarding his gifts. He also appeared to be more enamored with them and what they revealed about him and his place in the world than with the giver. During this time, we see how Joseph has matured and come to understand who should really be glorified in the use of the abilities that God gave him to steward. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream. Both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came into them in the morning and looked at them, and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his lord's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it." So Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please." Joseph recognizes that dreams and their interpretations come from God, who knows all things. When he asks to hear the dreams, it isn't out of pride in exercising his gift. It's out of a genuine desire to help these men using the gifts that God has given him. Dreams belong to God. Joseph belongs to God, and he receives knowledge and wisdom from the Lord. Joseph is a conduit, a gatekeeper between the officers and what they require to meet their needs. He's not the one, but he points to the one who should be glorified. Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, Behold, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. It was as though it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said to him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Now within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand according to the former manner, when you were his butler. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also have done nothing here that they should put me into the dungeon. It was not wrong of Joseph to ask this. A man's gift makes room for him, and brings him before great men. Joseph recognized a God-given opportunity and took it, and it paid off down the line. A godly man, or woman for that matter, does not seek to save their own skin when delivering a heavy prophetic message. A temptation for people who operate in the prophetic at any level, including dream interpretation, is to tailor the messages to the recipients to make them sound more favorable, even when the message is clearly a warning or a rebuke. Don't do that. God has already tailored the messages. It's your job to report what the Lord is revealing with accuracy, even if the message is heavy and devastating. Remember, it's not your name on the line. It's God's. He is not a liar, and he is not to be mocked. As his representative, you must bring a truthful report. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and there were 3 white baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. So Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from you. Joseph would have compromised his integrity had he not delivered the Lord's message accurately, because 3 days later, Pharaoh lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Even though Joseph must have been frustrated by being forgotten and left in the prison another 2 years, he didn't let fear and bitterness take root in his heart. We know this because he didn't try to disqualify himself when his gift finally provided him with the chance to leave the prison and approach Pharaoh. Joseph's tender heart toward God kept him in a state of readiness to answer Pharaoh's summons. When you've been hurt in a particular area, especially where your gifts are concerned, it's easy to not want to go anywhere near circumstances that could provide an opportunity for you to be hurt that way again. Trusting God with your heart and your hurt is the only way to get through it. That's a lot harder than it sounds.
You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Trusting God doesn't mean set it and forget it. It means actively believing that God is good when people and circumstances are not. That even though you are hurting, God sees it, knows it, and plans to turn it around for your good because you love him. Trusting God dictates that you not only believe his words, but you behave as if you trust him and do what he's telling you to do, even if it's a long shot or it doesn't make sense. If you can do all of this, you are maintaining a heart of flesh, and you will be in a better state of readiness to meet what's coming next. When Pharaoh had a disturbing duo of dreams and exhausted all the resources of his occult practitioners striving to find the interpretations, the butler finally remembered Joseph and brought him to the ruler's attention. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. And he shaved, changed his clothing, and came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it. So Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Godly men have to be ready to go. Joseph didn't have time to study or consider or mentally square away with himself before jumping into the fray. He had to be ready to go the minute he was called into action. Notice also that he immediately gave God glory before exercising his gift. Remember that all the magicians and practitioners have failed up until this point, leaving no one to turn to but the God of Israel. God is going to publicly get full credit and show himself superior to all the other gods and allegedly wise people. God should be the first one we ask about our dreams. If you can't slow down because the experience is so disturbing, then do like Pharaoh and bring in a godly friend who the Lord has trained to hear his voice this way and will tell you the truth. Pharaoh goes on to explain that he dreamed about 7 healthy cows rising from the river, only to be consumed by 7 gaunt cows, which continued to look lean and mean even after their horrible feast. He then dreamed of 7 healthy heads of grain being devoured by 7 heads of blighted grain. Joseph tells him, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 2 in biblical terms represents judgment and discernment, compare and contrast, among other things. When things repeat twice, a wise person does not need to be told a 3rd time. When Joseph was given 2 dreams about his elevation as a teenager, he knew it was going to happen, just not how. 2 has to do with recognizing the voice of God, his judgments, and his established will. There are times when we can intercede against disaster, but when you are shown something in 2s, it is an established thing. Your response should not be intercession, but preparation. Joseph says God is showing Pharaoh what he is about to do. He's going to do it. This is it. This is non-negotiable. This is the will of God being revealed to man to give him the opportunity to prepare and respond correctly. Joseph explains, the 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads are 7 years. The dreams are one, and the 7 thin and ugly cows which came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty heads blighted by the east wind are 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Indeed, 7 years of great plenty will come throughout all the land of Egypt. But after them, 7 years of famine will arise, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will deplete the land. So the plenty will not be known in the land because of the famine following, for it will be very severe. And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice, because this thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. So Joseph used the tools of discernment and interpretation to accurately reveal to Pharaoh what the Lord was speaking to him in the night watches. We know what's going to happen. Now we need to pull out wisdom to know what to do about it. And the Lord drops this instruction for Joseph to share. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Then that food shall be as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land may not perish during the famine. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Stop! Because of Joseph's integrity, this king of a nation steeped in false religion is going to let God be God. The precedent doesn't continue after him, unfortunately. But for a time, God is recognized as a wise and just ruler in the land of Egypt, necessary for their survival. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph his signet ring, a symbol of authority and power. He was outfitted with royal garments, and wherever he went, all were commanded to bow before him. And, true to form, He did not let the power go to his head. So he gathered up all the food from the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. He laid up in every city the food of the fields which surrounded them. Joseph gathered very much grain, as the sands of the sea, until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Joseph was 30 years old when he finally stood before Pharaoh and began to see the dreams from the Lord come to fruition. He'd spent roughly half his life in testing and trial, being prepared by God for this assignment. And once he finally made it there, he not only excelled in the work God set out for him to do, he also allowed God to heal him. That healing would be tested when the sons of Jacob, came knocking on Joseph's door to borrow a cup of grain, but that's another story. If you're finding value in this content, don't forget to like, sub, share, and hit the bell. New episodes drop Saturdays at 9 a.m. See you soon.